Few things are more dreaded than the words live-action adaptation when it comes to anime and manga, and yes, I'm going to say it that way. There are a host of reasons for this, be it unnecessary changes to the source material, trying to truncate 10 plus hours of content into a 2-hour time frame, or just straight up bad, uninspired direction from a production team that just doesn't care. Live-action adaptations have become so infamous that they've even spawned their own meme template, which sums up everything that is wrong with the format in a simple, easy-to-understand way. With very few exceptions, they just don't work, and are oftentimes, well, kinda shit. Yet, in spite of that, I wholeheartedly believe that Berserk, a series thought to be unadaptable within the modern anime industry, would be perfect for a live-action adaptation. Having said that though, I have a few qualifiers for my statement. The manga as a whole would be extremely difficult to pull off due to the scope of the work. However, I believe it is possible, since at one point, Lord of the Rings was thought to be unadaptable in a live-action form, only for Peter Jackson to come around and prove that sentiment wrong. I bring this up because I believe doing a straight chapter-to-chapter adaptation, though not impossible, would still be a bad idea. Previous live-action adaptations have tried this route before, only to crash and burn because critical parts of the story had to be cut out or reworked to fit within the limited time allowed. Branching off of that, since Miura seemingly releases chapters once every 5 months, an adaptation would almost certainly catch up to the source material well before it's finished. If Game of Thrones is anything to go by, this could end in utter disaster if the creative team tries their hand at doing their own ending, or by working off of the cliff notes provided by the author. For Berserk to be a good, if not an outright great live-action adaptation, it has to do its own thing during a specific point in the story's timeline. That point being the events during and following the Black Swordsman arc, ultimately ending with the Lost Children. Basically, what I'm proposing is that a live-action adaptation of Berserk should follow Guts and his quest for revenge, as he hunts down every apostle he can find in an episodic manner. Oftentimes, when live-action adaptations try to do their own thing, this, like following the story as much as possible, ends really, really poorly. Berserk, however, is in a very interesting position to be the exception to the rule, due to the manga's initial chapters and their presentation. For all intents and purposes, Berserk is an American Western, making it perfect for self-contained pulp storytelling. When you look at the two main apostles Guts takes down in the Black Swordsman arc, as well as the events of Lost Children, a pattern begins to emerge. Guts, as the mysterious Black Swordsman, walks into a town he's never been to before. As time goes on, he meets a few of the locals, fosters some sort of relationship with them, and ultimately gets involved with the problems that plague the town. By the end of the story, the problems have been dealt with, and the individuals that aided Guts on his adventure have had their lives irreversibly changed, sometimes for the better, and sometimes for the worse. On top of that, be it the Black Swordsman arc or Lost Children arc, actually all of Berserk now that I think about it, the story has heavy themes of man versus nature, versus society, versus the world. Guts is struggling against fate, against causality. He's not only contending with the forces of hell, heaven, when combating apostles, but the very laws which are said to govern reality in the setting. Guts should be dead. The world, be it the wildlife or those who live there, and those that persist beyond the world are trying to kill him. Yet, in spite of that, Guts keeps pressing forward. He keeps surviving. Those themes of man versus nature, versus society, versus the world, as well as the general structure of a mysterious stranger entering a troubled town, are foundational elements for many classical American westerns. Now, there has been something I've been neglecting to mention. Some bait, if you will, for a very select group of people. If you have or were about to comment something like, actually, Berserk is more akin to a samurai film because Kentaro Miura lives in Japan, then I have some news for you. Those two genres of film are the same. You fuck! Okay, they aren't exactly the same. However, Jedi Geki, Japanese period dramas that focus on the Edo period, and Chambara, samurai sword-fighting films specifically, have a close relationship with the American Western. So close, in fact, that they've influenced one another countless times. For a prime example of what I'm getting at, we need to look no further than the legendary filmmaker Akira Kurosawa. In the aftermath of World War II, the film industries and in turn film cultures of many nations had all but fallen apart for rather understandable reasons. The exception to this, however, was the United States and Hollywood. Very long, kinda complicated story short, American films became incredibly popular in quite a few countries. This includes Allied occupied Japan. By the 1950s, however, this lack of an international film industry had more or less faded away. Most countries were back on their feet, thus allowing the populace to have more artistic pursuits. Before World War II, Japan had a film industry, however, its impact upon the world at large was rather limited. It wasn't non-existent, but it lacked the impact of something like German Expressionism, a film movement from Germany that gave us Nosferatu and the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. This, however, would change with Akira Kurosawa's international smash hit, Rashomon, as well as a few other films, but I'm focusing on one thing in particular. What's important about this film, for the context of what we're talking about, is that it opened the eyes of many Americans to the budding Japanese film industry, an industry which was heavily influenced by World War II, the subsequent occupation, as well as the tidal wave of Hollywood films that followed, which dominated the nation's movie market. Though Rashomon is very good and very important, that I may add has the greatest, sweatiest sword fight of all time, another film by Akira Kurosawa is far more important for what we're talking about, that film being The Seven Samurai. Unlike Rashomon, this now legendary Chambara film didn't get much, if any, response from the general public in the United States. Film directors and others in the industry, however, are another story. Take, for instance, John Sturges, the director of The Magnificent Seven. As the names would imply, The Seven Samurai and The Magnificent Seven are the same story. A town plagued by bandits hires 7 skilled wanderers to both protect and train them. Something to note, because it highlights that these two genres of film weren't just ripping one another off, is Akira Kurosawa's reception to The Magnificent Seven. In The Warrior's Camera, the cinema of Akira Kurosawa by Stephen Prince, the Japanese director states during an interview that he found The Magnificent Seven to be exciting. From a technical angle, he enjoyed the American filmmaking, but was overall disappointed with the film. There were some aspects of his work and the American rendition which didn't translate from one culture to the next. The two films were exactly that, two films. They were different. Jidaigeki, Chambara, and the American Western take place at fascinating similar times during the history of two very different nations. Both genres take place after or in the midst of a great national calamity. For Japan, this is the Sengoku period, and for America, this is the Civil War. They focus upon the lingering aftermath the conflict inflicted, both upon the individual and the world that surrounds them. Going along with that, they also focus upon the ending of one era and the beginning of another. Once more, for Japan, this is the end of the samurai and the rise of imperialism, and for America, this is the end of the frontier and the dawn of the modern age. The one key difference of these genres, these stories, however, comes down to those that drive them forward. Oftentimes in Chambara, the mysterious figure who rolls into town is a samurai or a ronin, a masterless samurai, someone who's been trained since birth to become a warrior. In the American Western, however, this figure could be a drifter, a soldier, a deserter, outlaw, it doesn't matter. The lone gunman can be anyone, instead of a warrior trained since birth. And this is what separates the two genres, what makes them different. These ideas, in one capacity or another, are very much present in Berserk. The 100 Years' War between Midland and Tudor has ended. The world, and those touched by the aftermath of the conflict, must find a way to keep on living in a familiar place that now seems alien. Individuals whose lives have been shaped or changed by war must look to an uncertain future, while bearing the weight of all that had happened and finding a new path to tread. They must do this as the era they know ends. They must do this as an era far more terrifying and magical than the last begins. Berserk wasn't influenced by Chambara or the American Western, at least as far as I'm aware. That's not what I'm saying. The story, structurally speaking, however, shares so many similarities with these two film genres that they had to be mentioned because they've persisted for almost 100 years now. Berserk could be that one gem, that diamond in the rough, that could not only see itself survive as a live-action adaptation, but thrive. Japan and America are two very different cultures, yet the ideas and themes touched on by these two genres, as well as the historical context surrounding them, were able to cross that barrier and resonate with two distinct peoples. Hell, Guts himself is a mixture of both the wandering samurai and a lone gunman, and I'm not even talking about the cannon arm. Though he was taught how to fight with a sword at an early age, anyone can be a mercenary. It isn't a class you have to be born into, or a profession with a code of honor, yet it is still something one must dedicate themselves to if they wish to grow and survive. As an adaptation, I'd imagine Berserk as a series of feature-length episodes similar to Black Mirror, where various directors from across the world try their hand at telling self-contained, yet connected, dark fantasy stories. The setup would oftentimes be the same. Guts and Puck come across a place plagued by the evil of an apostle, meet someone who's been directly impacted by it, foster a relationship with the individual, fight said apostle, and then leave, never to be seen again as the sun slowly sets. Going along with that, the episodes that broke the mold could also show Guts traveling the wilderness and give us more insight into his daily life as nature, as well as other things which exist beyond nature, try to kill him. Once more, tying back into the reoccurring themes present in Chambara and Westerns. I don't know what this would look like per se, however, I'd be interested to see what happens, especially if directors from across the world got on board. Could you imagine someone like Guillermo del Toro, and I screwed up the first name, a master at practical effects and monster designs, taking a crack at Berserk? Or Park Chan-wook, the director of Oldboy, which is one of, if not the greatest revenge film of all time. Branching off of that, Miura's art is often very, well, it's picturesque, and it's rather realistic when it isn't terrifying. Unlike a modern-day anime, assuming of course this is treated with respect and care, that grit and near-realistic beauty which Berserk is known for can be properly captured because the work isn't trying to mimic reality, since it's in reality. Granted, this is all just wishful thinking. However, I think many of you can see my point. Much like the case with the Seven Samurai and Magnificent Seven, directors can bring their own unique take based upon their cultural and personal backgrounds that can turn a rather simple story or premise, Black Swordsman enters town, kills apostles, then leaves, into something truly special. I understand this is a bit of a weird take since live-action manga and anime adaptations have a tendency to suck, but I hope you could pick up what I'm putting down, dear viewer. Chambara and the American Western are tried and true genres with a long history of amazing work. The Black Swordsman part of Berserk had such a simple premise and layout that I think it could see massive success, entertaining fans of the long-running series while also doing it justice. But with that said, guys, I've been Bufar1on1. I'll see all you guys next time. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Goodbye.